All right, so lesson for today is going to be a brief introduction to just the overall of speech and debate, a little bit of sort of historical background on where it comes from, kind of the season, where we go, some tournaments, things like that, sort of what different championship tournaments are, that kind of stuff. The next lesson we'll have after this, we will go into a little bit of an overview of the numerous different events that are allowed in, that are participated in speech and debate. So, to begin with, sort of debate has history back, or speech and debate has history back a very long time, back to as early as the ancient Greeks. In the 5th century BC, the sophists are of ancient Greeks are designed to sort of determine sort of philosophers just trying to figure out sort of basic elements of truth and how do we create knowledge. And they used debate as a teaching tool. And they were the first ones to really sit down and plan and organize a way to use rhetoric, or the act of public speaking, the act of dialogue and discourse and conversation, argument, debate, to try and teach ideas to others. This is actually where sort of the foundations of modern education come from. The idea of using sort of those Socratic seminars as a way to teach others is sort of some of the very basic philosophical underpinnings of even modern educational systems, right? And so the what these what these folks used what was called rhetoric in order to do this. And rhetoric is defined as the art of persuasion through language. It is using language to get a point across to someone else, to try and persuade them to look at things your way and convince them of something. The person that is most associated with this idea of rhetoric, kind of the person that is thought to be as the father of rhetoric, is the philosopher Aristotle, specifically in the work that he wrote called The Art of Rhetoric. He sort of outlines some of the next couple of slides worth of terms that I'm going to talk about, of ways to utilize speaking and language to try and convince people of things and to teach people things. He, in this work, The Art of Rhetoric, outlines 3 different basic types of rhetoric, one of which is the one that we are going to be doing here in class. The first of these, the 3 are called forensic, deliberative, and epideictic. Forensic is the first of these types, and all of these are designed to determine some sort of truth or falsity about something, of whether or not my argument is true, whether or not it's false, how to use language to do that, right? Forensic rhetoric is designed to determine the truth or falsity of things that took place in the past. Let's take a look at some events, try and figure out what actually occurred, what didn't. This is the version of this you're probably most familiar with. You've probably seen this on television with the various sort of CSI police procedurals that utilize forensic police procedures, be it forensic medicine, forensic science, forensic accounting. What we're doing in speech and debate, and forensics is a term that is utilized sometimes as a umbrella term for speech and debate. There are literally some states that instead of having speech and debate championships, have forensics championships. The national organization that we're going to talk about in a little bit, for its first 100 years, had been called the National Forensic League, because the type of speaking that we are doing is the type of speaking that initially was thought of to be done like in a court of law, where you're trying to prove what happened in the past. Did someone commit the murder or not? The type of speaking that you would do to prove that past event being true or false. And so this term forensic, we use that as well, forensic medicine, forensic science, take a look at fingerprints and stuff, what actually happened, using science to determine the truth or falsity of things that happened in the past. And so the first sort of version of rhetoric is forensics. The second version of rhetoric that Aristotle outlines is called deliberative rhetoric, of sort of discussing what should be done in the future, right? Should particular actions be taken place in the future? This is what our legislators, or at least theoretically, supposed to be doing, trying to decide what steps should we take and moving forward. What types of policies should we implement? What types of action should we as a society, as a group of people, engage in as we move forward into the future? And the third type is epideictic, which is sort of discussing beauty and skill and kind of just what you discussed art. It is sort of praise, blame, beauty, and skill in the present. Looking at something today, trying to describe it. Is that beautiful? Is that not? Is that powerful? Is it not? What is its meaning? Sort of those sort of present tense discussions. In what we're going to do in public speaking, in speech and debate, is usually going to be some combination of the first two, of this idea of what happened in the past, and doing a lot of trying to determine what policy should we take in the future. So we're going to do a lot of that sort of deliberative rhetoric as well. The three different types of sort of rhetorical proof that that I'm just going to go here, that Socrates outlines as well. And these are three terms that we will use a lot. We will reference a lot. You're learning them basically on, functionally day one or so of class. And you will hear these all the way through, last day of senior year, right? This sort of three different ways that you can try and prove something. The first of those is ethos. Ethos is what's called an appeal to credibility. Each of these are an appeal to something. And so what you're doing is you're trying to seem like a very knowledgeable person. We trust what the speaker is saying because the speaker looks the part. The speaker seems to have credibility. This is why you will find that when we go to speech and debate tournaments, we will dress up nice. We will dress up in basically business wear. For gentlemen, that will be shirts and ties. For ladies, that will be something of sort of a similar level of sort of business professional appropriate type of attire, because you want to look like a person that is taking it seriously. It's why we don't show up in debate in like shorts and a t-shirt. Same thing. This is also why we use citations. We try and use evidence from very, very smart people who are experts in the field. If I have a 15-year-old tell me one thing, and I have somebody else saying, hey, this Harvard PhD says the opposite, which one of those am I going to believe? Maybe the 15-year-old without a college degree is right, but just from an audience persuasion perspective, we're probably going to trust the Harvard PhD because of the credibility of their background, of their knowledge in whatever it is we are talking about. And so this appeal to ethos, part of this, and especially in early on in speech and debate, is you need to look like you know what you're talking about. This is the fake it until you make it, right? The second sort of form of rhetorical proof that we have is called pathos. This is an appeal to emotion. This is trying to pull on the heartstrings. This is probably the most powerful of the three of these because research basically shows that if you can start triggering some of the emotional centers in the brain, then it overcomes all other sort of thoughts that are happening. And things like logic and stuff like that don't really matter until those sort of emotional centers get reined back in. But it's also the least you're the least consistent to be able to try and trigger, and also the most difficult to control. It's super powerful. You've seen this all the time when you see the commercials on TV about asking people to donate money for like the animal shelter and seeing the poor starving puppies and kittens and stuff like that, to try and get you to give money. This is a very blatant appeal to emotion. This is pathos at its core, and that is a powerful weapon in trying to convince someone of something using language. Finally, you have logic. You have logos, is the third one that Aristotle talks about. This is an appeal to reason and logic. This is going to be numbers. This is going to be pointing out logical fallacies in arguments. Are things consistent? This is a very sort of emotionally detached approach, and is something that can be very powerful, is very effective, and what we often try and focus on. Would love it if everybody would just go to this, but the problem is some of those like pathos and ethos considerations also come into play. And so any good persuasive effort is going to try and hit on a combination of all three of these, to have some credibility, some ethos, to appeal to some emotion, some pathos, and also to appeal to reason, logos, and trying to combine those three to help make your point and understand for each side of an argument, what are some of the strongest parts of that? What are some of the weakest parts of that? As far as some definitions going beyond, so we're done with the old dead Greek guys at this point. Some definitions of kind of what is debate, and this is what we're going to sort of start out with in here a little bit. Debate and arguing are not the same thing. We use arguments in debate, but from my perspective, debate is a very specific thing that is different than just like having an argument with your friends or your parents or whoever, right? Debate is a formalized discussion of opposing viewpoints with an intent of persuading an audience. So some of the big differences here, right? Debate is formal. There are rules to debate. There's who gets to take turns, what the topic is, time limit, stuff like that. Arguing is just let's have at it. No real rules. um, no time limits. People can interrupt each other. There's no sort of refereeing or anything like that, right? Debate for the participants, at least, is supposed to be objective. We're not necessarily arguing about things that we feel passionately about. We are arguing generally about a topic that has been given to us. Whereas when you're arguing with a friend about something, you usually have some sort of skin in the game, right? It's a thing that is important to you. It is something that is subjective, is something that has meaning for you in particular. You are trying to convince someone of your opinion because that is like your firmly held belief, right? And so part of what the game of speech and debate, is learning these skills of when given a topic, can you argue it effectively? So hopefully when you go out into the real world and apply the things that you are passionate about, you can take those skills and apply them to make you more effective, right? So in sort of academic, competitive, we are arguing about topics that are given to us and that we don't necessarily, like, you will have to debate both sides of basically every topic, right? You can't just like pick one side and stick with it. The third thing is, and I think one of the biggest ones, and probably the most important one in my mind, is a debate. You're not trying to convince your opponent of something. You are trying to persuade the audience and not your opposition. When you're in an argument with your friend, when you're with an argument with your parents, but whether they should like let you go out on Saturday or whatever it is, you're trying to convince the other side. I have never in a debate round ever seen halfway through a round one of the teams go, my opponents are right. I think you should let them win. It just doesn't happen. You're trying to convince a third party, an objective audience, as opposed to your opponents. And so always keep that in mind. We will say over and over again, the most important person in the room isn't you, isn't your opponent. It's the judge in the back of the room. That's who you're trying to convince. And the last sort of big difference between debate and arguing is that debate is about independent evidence. It is about finding research that supports your points. Most of the topics that we will debate, we as the debaters have very little personal experience with. Honestly, I hate to say this, but as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, your personal opinion on a debate topic really doesn't matter a whole lot. It doesn't carry an enormous amount of weight, largely because we try and do a lot with that ethos, that appealing to credibility. We'll go back real quick. That ethos here of appealing to credibility, we're going to use verifiable evidence from verifiable sources. And if you say, well, this is what makes sense to me, and someone has a piece of evidence from a verifiable source that says the opposite, generally you're going to prefer that verifiable source from an expert as opposed to the thoughts of a 15 or 16-year-old, even if it is a really smart 15 or 16-year-old. So we want to try and keep those personal observations out and make it about the evidence that we build upon. This is where some of the language of speech and debate is going to come in. Speech and debate loves themselves some acronyms. It's like alphabet soup a lot of times, and you're going to hear a lot of these thrown around. So we're going to introduce some of these to you for the first time. Oh gosh. Speech and debate has all kinds of organizations and tournaments and championships and stuff like that. And I want to at least introduce you to some of these. So we'll start sort of local and go national and then go into tournaments. So as far as California is concerned, there's both a state and a local organization. The state organization in California is the California High School Speech Association. That does include debate, even though it doesn't say debate in the name. It is independent in some states, and probably about a third or so of states, mostly kind of in the Midwest or so. Their version of CIF, the organization that does all the sports also does speech and debate. It's usually an activities association. So, like the state that I grew up in, Kansas, the state trophy for debate is given out and it is given out by the organization, the same organization, and looks exactly like the state championship trophy that is given out for like basketball or football. In California, CHSAA is separate from CIF. About a little more than half of states, speech and debate is entirely under its own umbrella. It's entirely self-regulated by coaches, and that is the sort of the model that we have here in California. The other organization that you'll hear about some is California divides its system up into a series of local leagues. There are, I believe, 11 of them in the state. They've got 4 regions. Each of the regions, except for one of them, has 3. One of the regions only has 2 local leagues. Our local league is the Tri-County Forensic League, or TCFL. There you can see that sort of older name of forensic still in the name, right? It is this area here with the orange, red, and the yellow, red, and green. It used to be 2 different leagues. There was a league basically in the San Fernando Valley that was the Tri Valley League. It was like here, Santa Clarita and like Ventura, and like Simi Valley. And then there was a separate league of like Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo. But the San Luis Obispo Santa Barbara League had a number of schools that stopped doing speech and debate, and eventually they folded it in. And so that was I think something like the name of that league had something with counties, which is why they then added counties to the new sort of combined league. And so now our local league basically stretches from pretty much this side of the hill, all the way from like Burbank all the way up to like San Luis Obispo. Most of the teams that compete are in the San Fernando Valley or over in like Ventura County. There's only 1 or 2 from San Luis Obispo that make the drive of 2.5 hours to our local tournaments any weekend that they do that. But this is for our local league tournaments. They're usually the TCFL tournaments is sort of what you'll see from those, and this name will pop up again. There are also some national organizations. Said lots of different letters. Different organizations. The NSDA, the National Speech and Debate Association, is this one here with the kind of little like star thing you'll see. This used to be called, when I was in school, the NFL, which obviously was confusing. It was the National Forensic League. That's what it had been up until somewhere around, I want to say about 2013, 2014 is when they finally maybe made the name change to NSDA. This is the organization. They'll host a national tournament we'll talk about. There, if you look around the room when you're in class, you'll see the little certificates on the wall. They're the ones that have a nationwide membership. They have a point system that is sort of up on the board. If you take a look on sort of the chapter history board in the room, you can be an All-American. You can be academic All-American through this organization. There's a lot of stuff that comes from here. But this is sort of the national organization. Keep in mind, though, that the state organization, CHSAA, does not report to NSDA. It's not like it is a subset of it. They are totally different things. It's just one is a nationwide organization that organizes stuff. One is a statewide organization that organizes stuff, even though they are not like directly connected. Other abbreviation for national things you'll hear. TOC, the Tournament of Champions, is going to be held at the University of Kentucky every year. That's sort of a big tournament. That's going to be a big deal for a lot of us. We'll talk about it a little bit more. That's kind of what the varsity folks are trying to aim for themselves for. You will also see the NDCA, the National Debate Coaches Association. The only thing you really need to know about them is they host a national championship tournament every year. That we will go to quite often. There is an organization that we don't participate in, but that is out there called the National Catholic Forensic League, NCFL, or sometimes just CFL. It is primarily East Coast and Midwest parochial schools, but there's a little bit in California. They host a national championship tournament. You will notice each of these first 4 organizations are a national organization. Each one hosts their own separate national championship tournament. So you could go to up to 4 different national championship tournaments each year if you so chose. We don't go to all of them. We don't go to CFL, and there's also the National Junior Forensic League, which is sort of the middle school branch of the NSDA. They have a national tournament as well. As far as some of our tournaments go, right? Most of our tournaments that happen most of our local tournaments that are going to happen here are usually take place on Saturdays. Occasionally there'll be something on also a Friday. Occasionally there'll be something also on a Sunday, but generally most local tournaments, both here and around the country, are pretty much on Saturdays. We've talked about that in class a little bit. That does require some scheduling. We can look ahead, look at calendars. I'll be happy to help you with that. But sort of keep in mind that's when most tournaments happen. In around here, what we do for our local tournaments, most of our tournaments happen to be in in Los Angeles County. We might have one over in Ventura County occasionally. We could conceivably, there's a tournament up in San Luis Obispo. If we wanted to go to it, we probably won't. But we'll have tournaments around. Most of our tournaments tend to be in the Valley. And actually, most of our tournaments, local tournaments, tend to be hosted up in the Santa Clarita Valley, up near like Six Flags, mostly because that local school district is much friendlier to debate tournaments and is much easier to get the buildings on Saturdays. LAUSD trying to rent out the buildings is very prohibitive, very expensive. It's just a big giant pain in the rear, and so it just doesn't happen. And so you'll get like a few of the private schools in the Valley. Burbank High School has a decent relationship like with their administration because they're not part of LAUSD. They're their own separate district, and so can get the school. Otherwise, we have a lot of tournaments up in the Santa Clarita Valley just because that's where we tend to be able to get places. So Granada Hills is a charter school up near Northridge that is, again, separate from LAUSD kind of, so we can get stuff there. We'll have a tournament at Cal State Long Beach that we'll go to. Palos Verdes Peninsula High School has a tournament we will attend in January. That was actually the weekend of the fire, right after the fires last year. We also might end up going to a tournament out at Claremont High School out in the far eastern portion of the county. So yeah, that's kind of our local tournaments that we have. We also will have some travel tournaments available. The local tournaments are available to basically anybody who wants to go. The travel tournaments are a little more limited. Usually you have to demonstrate that you have some sort of commitment to it. You've gone to some tournaments before. Maybe you're going for a specific purpose. This is what a lot of our older varsity kids will do a lot more of. These tournaments tend to be larger tournaments, multi-day tournaments, 2 and even sometimes 3 days long, like maybe a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So they'll take up an entire weekend. They'll draw in folks from all over the region or sometimes even all over the country. We're sort of going and seeking out kind of the best competition and best judging. We have a fairly, I wouldn't say aggressive, but a pretty solid travel schedule for our varsity folks. We every year will usually go to at least 1 or 2 tournaments, 2 or 3 tournaments up in the Bay Area, in and around San Jose. And this year we'll probably go to Cal Berkeley. We're going to go to Milpitas, which is in the South Bay area. Just north of San Jose. We may go there one for January as well. So we might be up in the Bay Area 3 or maybe even 4 times. We'll have at least a tournament. We may end up going to Minneapolis 2 or 3 times this year. There's a couple of regular season tournaments that are hosted there. One at the beginning of November, one right at the beginning of winter break that we'll go to. Big major tournament in Chicago the weekend right before Thanksgiving. That is probably the most difficult invitational tournament in the country, hosted at Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South, called the Glenbrooks, that we will attend. We'll have a tournament in Utah we'll go to in early December that we did very well at last year that we're hoping to maybe win this year. A tournament in Las Vegas at UNLV the first weekend of February that we'll go to. Last year we went to Atlanta. We're hoping to go. We will not go there this year. We're hoping to go back to Atlanta probably next year in January, maybe. We might also end up going to Arizona as well. Maybe we might go to Oregon or North Carolina. That is one weekend that is still a little bit up in the air. So there's a wide array of some sort of travel opportunities. Sadly, most of these we don't end up having a lot of time to do sightseeing and stuff. We kind of go in, do our tournament stuff, hop on a plane, get back, because we want to try and keep you in school as much as possible. Several of these are on some long weekends that make it so that missing school is less prohibitive than some others. But yeah. And then now kind of the championship tournaments that we've got. These are all kinds of different things you can qualify for. We've got a state championship tournament. The regular season for speech and debate begins in September. Our first tournament is actually, we're going to take at least a team probably to an online tournament this coming weekend. So like basically after the first full week of school. The regular season usually ends about the middle to end of February. At that point, March and April are kind of the qualifying and championship season. And so, like I said, there's lots of different national championship tournaments. There's a state tournament. They all have sort of different calendars, right? CHASA, the state organization, hosts their own state championship tournament. The rotation the location rotates league by league, year to year. This year, it's going to be in the East Bay, likely going to be at James Logan in Union City, just north of San Jose. For those of you that are freshmen, your senior year, it will rotate and it will actually be in our local league. Will host it probably up in Santa Clarita somewhere. Next year, it should be in like either I think Orange County or San Bernardino County. The following year will be in the Central Valley someplace, and then for freshmen, your senior year would be here. Last year, it was down at Culver City. It's always held either late April or early May. This year, it's like I want to say like maybe the 20th and 21st or so, that weekend of April. And the way you qualify for it is each local league, each of the 11 local leagues has a series of state qualifying tournaments for whatever events you're in, that the top 5 or 6 people in each event will go to the state tournament. Those happen either in late February or early March, depending upon if it is debate or speech. The only big thing with that is in order to attend one of those qualifiers, you have to have participated in at least one local TCFL Open tournament throughout the year at some point in time. Not even in the same event, but just have gone to at least one of the local tournaments. And so if trying to qualify to state is a thing you're interested in, I may be like, hey, let's go to this tournament so you can be eligible to go to state quals. This is one we have taken multiple freshmen to in the last several years. Last year, we took a team of two. We took a team of 2 freshmen in debate, in addition to a couple of varsity folks. The year before, we took 4 kids. All of them were novices. All of them were beginners. You can qualify to the state tournament as a beginning debater, as a first-year debater. It is very possible. And so, if you are someone that is interested in that, that is put that sort of in your mind, because that is out there. Second, I'm going to go sort of chronologically for these. We got a couple different national championship tournaments. NDCA, the National Debate Coaches Association, they host a national championship tournament as well. It is usually early April. This year, it happens to be mid-March. It's the earliest I've ever seen it. It's actually the first week of spring break. The location rotates. Last year was in Atlanta. This year, it's going to be up in Minneapolis. And so it will be like maybe the second or potentially third time. We go to Minnesota this year. For this one, there are no qualifications. I can take whoever I want to, at least in public forum, the event that we primarily participate in. It's what's called an all-comers tournament. Whoever wants to go can go. Last year, we took 3 first-year debaters to it. 3 out of the 8 kids we took were first-year debaters. So this can be a good kind of end-of-the-year culminating championship tournament if you've kind of been into it throughout the year. We kind of use this as a warm-up for the TOC, and we're going to talk about the TOC on the next slide. It is a national championship. You can put national championship on your resume. We are hoping to have a team that has maybe competing for that this year. They also, big thing they do is they give out a year-long award for of the teams that go to this tournament. The team that has had the best overall regular season gets to kind of be named the regular season national champion as well, which is kind of a cool thing, which we hope maybe in about a year to be in competition for. That would be really nice. The big one that everybody sort of shoots for around here, at least in our program, is the TOC, the Tournament of Champions. This was started by the University of Kentucky. I think this last year was the 50th anniversary of the TOC. It's sort of the national championship of the national circuit, if you will. This is hosted every year at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky. It's always hosted like in mid to late April. This year, it is like the 11th through 13th, May, or 12th through 14th of April. So like we get back from spring break or in school for a few days, and then we'll fly to Kentucky. For this one to qualify, you have to earn bids throughout the year. This is why we travel to some of those tournaments, some of those travel tournaments around the country, is because the TOC committee puts together a list of like the 70 or 80 biggest, baddest tournaments in the country and says, you have to do reasonably well at a couple of those throughout the year to earn your spot at the TOC. Each time you go and do something, you have to earn a bid. Maybe you got to get top 16 at one tournament, or top 8 at another, or top 4 at another one. And the way you do that is you go to the tournaments. If you qualify, if you have two bids, you get in for sure. If you have just one throughout the season, you can apply. But yeah, this is kind of the biggest tournament we've got that we aim for. And then finally is the NSDA Nationals. This one, the location rotates. This year it's going to be in Richmond. Next year it's going to be in Phoenix. This is in the third week of June every year. This is after school ends, which is why we haven't gone to it the last couple of years. In order to qualify for this, there is a local qualifier out of the local NSDA district. Ours is the West Los Angeles district, or there is a nationwide online last chance tournament in April. The only sort of qualifications for this, in order to go, you can only take 4 people in any one event, or 4 entries in an event, and you have to be an NSDA member, which most all of you should be without any problem. So yep, and so we will have next class. The next lesson will be on all different events we have. So go ahead, and if you have not finished them yet, make sure to answer all the questions.